Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes? Matt here from YoVideogames, back again with another Real Talk-ish video, and I wanted to talk about something that, well, frankly, a lot of you have probably been thinking about for a long time now, and that is the next-gen fighters, or more specifically, where are they? So here we are, we're about a month or so into the next generation launch of these brand new consoles with the PlayStation 5 and the Series X, and, you know, typically in the past, if you go back to anything in the 32-bit era beyond, fighting games used to kind of be a staple of game launches or software launches for new generation stuff. For one of the big reasons for this was that a fighting game, you can really show off the graphics of a new console because you can focus almost entirely just on the character models or a very small area of space around them, so you can kind of really go nuts with, you know, just showing off fancy effects, fancy graphics, you know, all that jazz. And that was kind of true for a while, and then it kind of just stopped because we got to this generation launch and there's not a single new fighting game, and there's not even like an indie fighter that's kind of exclusive or unique to the next generation, and that's kind of weird. But anyways, I'm going to go down the company's list, publisher by publisher, and kind of talk about where we're at and see, you know, what's going on with them, and then kind of give my sort of thoughts and predictions, if you will. So let's just talk about the big one, get it right out of the gate first, and that's Capcom. And that would be a obvious sort of like, well, there's obviously the Street Fighter V still going on. They still got a lot of DLC planned for it, but even before the more recent stuff that happened, there was already sort of insider information coming about, like even a couple months ago, that like, hey, Street Fighter's not really super on track. We're not going to see a new Street Fighter for quite some time. And this sort of seemed to be backed up by the fact that they were doing a whole nother season of DLC fighters for Street Fighter V, you know, starting with Dan and then going all the way past Akira from Rival Schools, and I think there's one more beyond that. And that roadmap that they showed, you know, back in the summer, that went to, you know, fall of next year. So it's actually kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, well, they definitely are not going to be releasing, like, say, a Street Fighter 6, you know, before they're done with Street Fighter 5, and it's looking like, boy, this ain't gonna really show up until, like, you know, early 2022 at the earliest. So, I mean, things change. I mean, there are certain leaks out there, obviously, with Capcom, but, you know, that info is, you know, also old at this point, so, you know, stuff could happen, you know, in between, but unlikely that anything's gonna be coming out sooner than later with that, you know, especially with, like, you know, with this year with COVID. You're going to see this brought up a lot. Like, COVID's going to be a reoccurring name brought up, so if you're going to turn this episode into a drinking game, you know, protect your liver. Don't do it off of that word. But anyways, yeah, as far as Capcom goes, it looks like, yeah, there's not going to be anything from them specifically new as far as a fighter goes for next gen, probably for quite some time. They're probably just going to ride out Street Fighter V for, you know, at least another year from now. So we're not looking till early 2022 before we see anything from them. So that's kind of a bummer. And the other bummer is that from what we can kind of foretell, and I'm not really going to go into much specifics, but it doesn't look like Capcom's got a lot planned on the fighting game horizon either. And that's a little concerning, disappointing, but not also not too shocking. If you've been following the past couple years for Capcom, you might have noticed that, you know, when they were starting to, like, update positioning and whatever at Capcom, their gaming division or whatever, their Dev Studio 2, which does fighting games, they were shifting leadership, and you know, we knew from like a year ago that, or maybe more than a year ago, that Sugimoto from Monster Hunter, who's also related to the CEO of the whole company, he got moved to fighting game division, which was kind of like probably the first big I guess red flag, you could say, like something's up. And then Ono departed the company this year, and he'd been doing fighting game stuff forever. And it just seems kind of obvious that, like, Capcom has a lot of great things going for it. It's got a lot of cool stuff it's probably going to be making. But if there's one part of Capcom's house that is not in order, it's the fighting games. And you don't even need you don't even need a leak to know this or see this, because the shifting of management, the departure of Ono, like, it was obvious something was up with Capcom's fighting game division, and they're probably, you can basically look at them and they're in a restructuring phase. They're sort of rebuilding, so it's going to be a little while for them, which is, it's a little unfortunate. But again, if you go all the way back in time, Street Fighter 2 was not a launch title for the Super NES. It came out a couple of years after the system came out. So, it's probably going to repeat. History's going to probably repeat itself here a little bit, where, we might not see the big new Street Fighter game for a couple of years and two, but maybe not even a couple of years. Maybe we're really lucky. Maybe it'll just be like early 2022. But anyways, yeah, Capcom not looking hot, and definitely nothing recent. And moving right along on that, we've got Namco. And they're sort of like the I guess, I don't want to call them a Cinderella story, because they've always been pretty big. But they definitely exploded this generation because Tekken 7 really took off. And, it was a really good example of a company that released a hit product, people liked it, stuck with it, kept, updating it, and it's done very, very well for itself. So they're doing great as far as current gen goes. But here's the weird thing. Namco's been very quiet about next gen. They've been quiet about next gen anything. Like, even all their anticipated games that they have coming out that are not out yet, that are not even fighting games, like Tales of Arise and Elden Ring. It's like, they're not even next gen games. So I actually have no idea what's going on with Namco, because they've been doing well. They've released a lot of fighters. It's just kind of weird how, like, we've heard absolutely nothing about their next-gen plans. Now, here's the thing. Soul Calibur 6 just, as of this recording, like, it was finished with its DLC roster, and Tekken 7 has, I think, one more character and one more stage coming out that we know of for Tekken 7. So it might be, we might be pretty close to, done with their current stable of fighters, but in a weird sort of way, I don't know that they're necessarily ready to release, say what's probably going to be Tekken 8. 7's been out a long time, and I doubt the majority of, say, whoever works on Tekken at Namco has been doing nothing but DLC. Like, they had to have, in my mind, I imagine, they have to have been working on something behind the scenes, probably, maybe for a little while now. But again, COVID probably slowed a lot of stuff up. We never got a proper E3, we never got a proper EVO. So what might have been big announcements didn't happen. And if they were planning to announce it this year, they certainly didn't take any opportunity at any other online event. So Namco's actually a huge question mark for me, because I definitely think they're probably in the best position to be releasing a big new 3D fighter sooner rather than later, but due to COVID and due to the fact that maybe they want to ride out another year on Tekken 7, finish their DLC, but then also let that sit for a little while. I don't know. There's the other big problem too, is that maybe at this point, since they weren't there for launch, maybe they're waiting for the install base to grow a lot bigger on these next gen consoles. And the other thing is too, is that they might do what a lot of people are doing. Tekken 8 may end up being a cross-gen fighter. It's really hard to say, because it's always hard to follow up a super successful fighter with another one, right, like back-to-back, that sort of huge back-to-back sales. And what I mean by that is, like, you see Street Fighter 2 came out, and it was one of the most successful fighting games of all time, one of the most, and still to this day is one of the most successful Capcom fighters. But Capcom had a hard time finding the level of success from that game with other subsequent Street Fighters after 2. It wasn't until like Street Fighter 4 that they had a big resurgence, where like a ton of casual, huge mass media market kind of bought into Street Fighter again. And that's kind of true for Tekken 2, where 1 and 2, 1 obviously sold well because it was sort of close to launch on PlayStation 1, but in 2 it probably did okay. 3 exploded. 3 had this huge popularity, but Tekken 4 kind of dipped. It wasn't as popular, wasn't as well received. 5 did well-ish, but most people really prefer the not the DLC, but the Dark Resurrection version of Tekken 5. 6 is kind of the same boat, where 6 and Tekken Tag 2 were both kind of like, they sold well, but they didn't explode. But Tekken 7 did really, really well. So if they're doing a cross-gen, what I mean is, if they go to Tekken 8, and Tekken 8 is on PS4 and PS5, there might be a lot of people who just don't want to buy into Tekken 8 because, I have 7, and 7 has so many characters and so many options. Why would I want to start all brand new on the same console? I think it'll probably behoove Namco to make Tekken 8 more of a next-gen only fresh start, like really push the graphical boundaries, because Tekken's always been sort of a looker. It's always been a game that really pushes the razzle-dazzle on the graphics. So my personal feeling is that Tekken 8 should be a next-gen only game, but I don't know what Namco's doing because they've been so quiet as far as anything next-gen goes. But who knows? Soul Calibur, I'm kind of less optimistic about. 6 did okay, but it didn't hit anywhere near the highs of Soul Calibur 2, which again, like Soul Calibur 1 was sort of this graphical showpiece for what it was only for Dreamcast, but it did really well for a Dreamcast game, and 2 exploded in popularity with its guest characters, and then 3 being only on one console, and a follow-up to 2 really kind of sold less than that, and 4 kind of tried to bring it back with Star Wars, but, wasn't as big as 2 as far as sales go, and then 5, nobody likes it at all, kind of really stumbled out the gate, and then as far as popularity goes, and 6 sort of a refresh, return to form, but like it's not hitting the high highs of Soul Calibur 2 as far as popularity goes. So yeah, it's I'm less optimistic about the future of Soul Calibur. I think it's in a weird position where it's like, okay, well, 6 didn't bomb, like there's interest, like there's definitely some interest there, but it didn't skyrocket in popularity, which Namco's probably a little wary of continuing the franchise, which is really unfortunate. But Namco is a huge effing question mark. And as far as other stuff goes, like Dragon Ball, Smash, whatever, I'll get to that later. But yeah, as far as Namco goes, I'm going to say huge question mark. I anticipate, due to COVID and due to the fact that they've been very shy about anything else, I'm going to say we're not going to see anything new from Namco within the next year as far as fighting game goes. That's just a prediction. I could be totally wrong about that. They could really surprise us by quickly announcing a Tekken 8 for PS5 very shortly and have it released by the end of 2021. That might happen, but part of me kind of doubts it. But Namco's in the best position. They're in the best position to have a big new next-gen fighting game, but I just... from the silence that we've been seeing from them and the fact that they still have at least one more character to go on 7, that's why I think probably not. Now, moving on to SNK, here's an interesting one. Obviously, they've been in the news recently with some of the shareholder news that's been going on. But as far as the actual game development of SNK goes, they're weird because they have a known fighter that's yet to be shown. Like, King of Fighters 15 exists. It was announced at EVO last year, and they have yet to show a single piece of media from the game still, and we don't know what's up with it. It's obviously going to be cross-gen. They haven't even really said if it is, what system it's on technically, on a very technical level, but it's obviously going to be PS4 and PS5 and Xbox One and Series X and probably PC. But we have no idea. We know zero information about the game. We know nothing, and it's a little frustrating. I think King of Fighters fans are going nuts because EVO, or the time around EVO rolled around, and they had the fighting game kind of developer roundtable, and the SNK people just said, "Well, it's being made on the floor above us, but we can't talk about it. We'll talk about it soon." Nothing, right? TGS rolls around, they get nothing. And we're rolling around to the end of 2020, and we still have heard and seen nothing. So I think SNK fans are a little justifiably going a little stir crazy. A Sam Show did really, really well for them. Really sort of took off as sort of like an underdog tale. That's a real Cinderella story there. I expect King of Fighters 15 to be cross-gen, but I also don't expect it to be much of a looker, because and that just sort of like falls in line with history, where it's like, okay, SNK has never been the top dog when it comes to graphics, unless we're talking about 1990, or 91 or something. Like, they've never been a graphical powerhouse. They've never been the company that pushes stuff early. But it's like SNK fans obviously just want to play more another King of Fighters, because 14 was well received. Kind of looked fuck ugly when it came out, but they polish it up, and there's a shit ton of characters, and it's super technical and depth fighter, and the fans love it. But where's 15? Why the holdback on 15? I don't know. I'm guessing COVID had a huge issue with why they held back on showing 15 this year. Next week we might see it at the game advertisements. Who knows? But SNK is a weird one. I do expect this. I expect King of Fighters 15 to come out in 2021. but I don't think it's going to wow anyone graphically. It's not going to blow anyone's socks off. It's going to be cross-gen, and that's going to be that. Like, it'll be another solid technical fighter that will have tons of depth and probably be really well received. But it ain't gonna knock anyone's socks off with its graphics. But I am anticipating that we will see the release of King of Fighters 15 in 2021, despite all the setbacks this year from COVID and whatnot. But I'd hate to be wrong on that. But yeah, I expect to see it shown. I don't know when we'll see it shown, but I do expect it to come out probably sometime late summer, fall next year. That's when I'm expecting King of Fighters 15 to actually show the F up. So, okay, let's move on to the one that actually, sells really well, and that's NetherRealm Studios. Now, here's the oddball. NetherRealm Studios has for like a decade been on a tight schedule of releasing a brand new fighter every 2 years in the spring exactly, and it's been that way since like Injustice 1 and then MKX and Injustice 2 and then Mortal Kombat 11. Like, even when we thought they were going to be delayed with Mortal Kombat 11, they just held back on showing MK11 until January and then releasing it immediately in March. Like, it was like somewhere between March to May. They release a fighting game, just bam, 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 bam. MK9, Injustice 1, MKX, Injustice 2, MK11. So naturally, that would set the timetable up where this is, if we follow everything along, next month, NetherRealm could potentially show an Injustice 3, and then Injustice 3 could show up on next gen sometime April, May, or even March. That would be literally repeating what happened in 2019 with MK11. However, I do think if there was going to be anything that combo broke NetherRealm's 2-year game streak, it's going to be COVID. We haven't heard anything. Like, there's not even been rumors or rumblings. But if anything was going to break their streak at this point, it would be COVID. And it might have. The question will be, how long did it break? Because normally NetherRealm would be expected to have a brand new fighting game in the spring of 2021. COVID happened, so that could have delayed it to fall. That could have delayed it a whole year. We don't really know. And the thing is, we have not even heard rumors or anything from any sort of source anywhere. Like, no one's really said anything. Here's my weird gut feeling. Injustice 3 would generally be what's next up on the docket, right? Like, that's their next game. I don't know that it's Injustice 3, actually. Part of me actually is thinking that it might be something new. I don't think it's going to be another Mortal Kombat. Like, I don't think they're going to go from MK11 to MK12. Part of me thinks that they might be doing a new fighting game, or maybe it's a DC fighter but not called Injustice. I don't know. Part of me there's just this gut intuition feeling that, like, I almost kind of feel like they're going to do like a horror-based movie fighter, like take a lot of Warner Brother owned like horror franchises and Terrordrome the shit out of this. That's sort of kind of what I'm thinking, maybe. But I'm not sure about that exactly. Part of me wonders, like, I think they're going to throw us a curveball. I don't think Injustice 3 is going to be the next. I could be completely wrong. Could just be Injustice 3, and that's exactly what they're doing. Could be totally wrong about this, but part of me just has this weird intuition, like, I don't think it's happening for Injustice 3. I think it's going to be something new and different. I don't know about new IP, but maybe, because if it were to come out in the spring of 2021, making a new IP fighting game, that is the absolute best time to do it, is the launch of a new console. That is when you launch new IP fighters. So, hey, maybe. But yeah, I don't know. NetherRealm is a weird one for me. I don't think it's Injustice 3. I could be wrong about that. And I'm going to wager that COVID did have some effect on NetherRealm, and we're not actually going to see the streak of 2 years continue, and it will have delayed it 6 to 12 months. So it might be next year, but it might be spring 2022 when we actually see NetherRealm's next game. We didn't really hear about it, how much COVID really impacted the company at all. So it's really hard to get a read on what's going on with NetherRealm Studios, but that's my guess. My guess is that it's not necessarily Injustice 3, but because of COVID, it won't make spring 2021. Moving on to everyone's favorite darling developer, Arc System Works, and they're the only ones who have like an actual known next generation fighting game, but it's a cross gen, and it's Guilty Gear Strive, and that's coming out I think, was it April on both PS4 and PS5. Obviously, I think that's going to be a lot of focus for Arc System Works. I have no idea what's going on with their other fighters. I don't know if there's more characters coming out for Dragon Ball FighterZ. I've kind of stopped following that game. I think there might be another one. I don't even effing know. I know that they're probably on contract to do more Grand Blue Fantasy characters. But what's interesting about Arc System Works is that they've been very, very, very busy, right, this generation. And here we are, we're getting close to that launch of Guilty Gear Strive. And I have to imagine Dragon Ball is mostly wrapping up production on whatever else they have left to do on the project. Grand Blue's probably got some DLC characters still coming, but come April, May of next year, Arc System might be finally done with their big projects, and the only thing left will be the DLC Fighter Pass Season Pass for Guilty Gear Strive. To working on that, so I think next year we're going to see something come up with Arc System Works. It'll be interesting to see if they've made any new deals, any new contracts or whatever, because obviously they teamed up with Namco and with Toei to make a Dragon Ball game. They teamed up with Psy Games to make a Grand Blue game. It'll be interesting to see if anyone else has been snatching them up to make some pretty cel-shaded fighter for next gen as well. So it's going to be real interesting to see. The only other weird thing is that as amazing as Arc System Works games look, they're actually very low tech. Like they're not graphically intensive games. They just look graphically intensive, just because the art style is so outstanding in their games. But what they're doing is hard to do from a development standpoint, but it's also not taxing on the hardware. So what I'm getting at is that Guilty Gear Strive is going to have a PS5 version, and it's going to be higher res than the PS4 version, and that's going to be it. Like they're going to look pretty much the same graphically. It's going to be weird, but this is actually a good thing for Guilty Gear in a way, because being the first big next gen fighter on PS5, even though it'll be a cross-gen game, not counting, there is Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate as well. I know that exists, but This is actually a great opportunity where it'll be a brand new released title that'll have a PS5 version, and this is Guilty Gear's time to shine. This is it. Hopefully, Strive lives up to what people want it to be, their expectations, because this is the absolute best opportunity for Guilty Gear right now, building off of all the popularity they've gained from Dragon Ball, being the fact that it'll be one of the first new fighters to be a brand new fighting game releasing on next gen. This is its time. So I hope it does well. And I think we'll hear more from Arc System Works sometime next year about what else they got cooking, because you better believe that they're not just gonna, here's Guilty Gear Strive, we'll announce DLC characters, and that's kind of it. We don't have anything else. No, they're definitely working on something. Something's happening, whether it be Persona 5 Arena, or the brand new next BlazBlue, whatever. Like, you're gonna hear something from Arc System next year. They're not going to be just doing Strive and finishing up Grand Blue or whatever and calling it a day. There's more coming from them. I predict we'll see more or hear more from them after Strive next year, and that kind of leaves just a couple other companies, just two that I can think of off the top of my head. Well, let's just quickly go over it. Like, there's Nintendo. They may have a Switch Pro. They're in no position to be talking about a new Smash Bros. I don't want them to make a new Smash Bros. I just want them to keep making games for Ultimate, and I think Nintendo wants to too. Depending on how well the DLC sells for Ultimate Season Pass 2, I think Nintendo's going to be very tempted to just continue that game. There's no reason to stop in my mind. But we'll see what happens. But anyways, nothing's happening on Smash Bros. For a long time. Sega announced something with Virtua Fighter Esports at Tokyo Game Show this year. I think we'll probably obviously see more of that next year. I'm hoping it is just straight up just a Virtua Fighter 6. They're the wild card because I love me some Virtua Fighter, and I'm excited about getting a new Virtua Fighter. But it was so confusing with the announcement, like, hey, we got Virtua Fighter Esports something, but not really saying what. They didn't say is this a new game? Is this a new arcade? Is this new console? Like, what is it? Like, but Sega's in a good position here because, like, if they have actually something ready to go to release next year in 2021 that is Virtua Fighter related, Sega's in a good position to actually bring the series back, especially if it's a looker. And Virtua Fighter games have been nice-looking games for a long. Like, Virtua Fighter 5 still looks good. Like, the character models are a little, but like the animation on them is still fantastic and almost unmatched to this day. So. I pray to God, Virtua Fighter, whatever's going on, is basically VF6, and it is coming out next year because this is the time to shine, Sega. But it is Sega, so they're probably going to drop the ball because if there's anything Sega's really good at, it's dropping a ball. I'm trying to think if there was, I think that mostly rounds out about everything else. I know there was something else I was forgetting, but yeah. So I hope that happens for Virtua Fighter with Sega, and yeah, I'm trying to think of what else. So that's kind of what's going on there, and of course, so yeah, there was something else though, some other fighting game. I can't remember what it was. Just what? Of course, where the fuck is Killer Instinct? Okay, this to me, I've been holding this in. No more jokes. This is absolutely fucking insanity to me. The fact that there seemingly is no new Killer Instinct ready to go, that there wasn't one for launch on the Series X, and there isn't one that we know about at all coming anytime soon. We've heard nothing rumor-wise about anything existing, and just, I don't fucking get it. I don't fucking get it. They had Killer Instinct as one of their big launch titles for the Xbox One, which was one of their few success stories, especially at launch last generation, because Xbox got trounced for trying to pull out this weird DRM always online internet box, and they had to take that away. And one of the few games at launch on the Xbox One that wasn't that was successful and was beloved was Killer Instinct, and it just year after year after year afterwards, it just got more beloved, more bigger, like more eyes got on it. They had the Windows release and they had the Steam release. And it's done well. It's had multiple millions of downloads. It's had tons of success. It's just this beautiful Cinderella story from a little smallish Xbox Live arcade style fighting game to it's just now it grew. The roster was tiny and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and survived all these setbacks. And they've done fuck all with it. They don't have a fucking thing going. Like it's absolute pure fucking insanity to me because companies exist to make money, and when you have an IP reboot and it does super well, it exceeds your expectations, blows you away. It has these big tournaments and all these great fundraising events and all that shit, and it just does super well. It's got public and critical acclaim, and it's got sales, it's got numbers, it brings in money, more money than you ever thought it would, and you do fucking nothing else to follow it up with your next system. It makes no fucking sense. I don't know what the fuck's going on. The fact that there had to be a Bring Back KI, a hashtag or whatever, or movement, like, is just pure fucking insanity to me. Like, how the fuck was this not put into motion the minute they started planning their launch games? Like, this should have been in production, to go to launch with the system, just like Halo Infinite was supposed to. I don't get it. I don't get it. This is one of the most mind-bendingly weird things to me, especially about Microsoft, who was, realized, that at the end of this generation, they don't have first party. They don't have a huge library. They're not competing on a scale with Sony as far as first party titles go, and they needed to fix that. So they go out and they buy 12 studios. They have all these fucking games go into production, and not one of the few success stories of your Xbox One lifespan. Like, why? Why would you not do that? How the fuck did this happen? Like, They still collect money from the old one. How do they not sit there and go like, oh, people are still playing this, people still love this. Oh, there's a big old online movement for it. Like, should we do anything? Nah. What the fuck? What the absolute fuck is going on there? It's so baffling to me. It's like imagining if Guitar Hero, after Guitar Hero 3, Activision just said, yeah, we're good on Guitar Hero, we don't need to make anymore. It was super successful. I mean, they made 20 more and buried the franchise, but like, could you just imagine them stopping Tony Hawk games after 2, or if like they released the Crash trilogy, like the remake, and which sold super well, like 10 million copies or something. And they just went, okay, that's good. We don't need to make Crash Team Racing remake. We don't need to make Crash 4. We don't need to make a Spyro remake. We don't need to do any of that shit. Like we had this remake come out and it blew our expectations away. But should we make another one? No, fuck no. Like let's just leave it at wow. Like. I can't believe it. It makes no sense from a greedy corporation standpoint. It makes no sense from a critical standpoint. It makes no sense from a consumer standpoint. It makes no sense. Nothing about Microsoft just dropping Killer Instinct makes any fucking sense. I don't get it. And from what I can see, I don't know if anything's happening anytime soon. If something is, it's probably very early stages, but yeah, not next year, probably not the year after that. It could be a long time before KI ever shows up again. I don't get it. I don't fucking get it. Do you guys get it? If you guys get it, let me know in the comments below, because this has run its course, its length, and I will see you on the channel. Later, dudes.